What was the first state that passed laws enabling a condominium?
I'm going to go on the East Coast. I am going to say New York.
You would think so, yes. Hawaii, 1958.
Really?
Yes, how about that?
Not until 1958.
Hawaii. Hello everybody, I'm Gary Hughes, also known as Nova Agent, and of course this is Yogi. He's the hardest working dog in real estate, and I say the hardest working dog in real estate. So today, if you are a Virginia first-time home buyer, or you are looking to downsize, get into a smaller place, maybe retire, get out of the large house and move to a condominium, this is especially for you. You really need to sit down and spend a few minutes with this video, because I'm here with David Cartner, my friend. We've done other videos. Welcome, David.
Thank you for having me again, Gary.
Yep, and we are going to be discussing condominium and HOA, or homeowner association, documents. And the reason for that is, David, recently I've had a number of clients who are either first-time home buyers or downsizers. And they're getting the condo docs, more so than the homeowner association docs.
Right.
But if you're moving into a 55-plus community, you're going to get the homeowner association docs.
Yep.
Anyway, but we've been getting these condo docs. I've been getting a lot of questions about them. So I wanted to spend some time talking about what's inside of condo/homeowner association documents, and what should they really focus on? What are some areas to make sure to look at? We're not going to tell you to avoid anything. I don't want to tell anybody to avoid anything.
Yeah.
But these things come in and they can be hundreds of pages, and you have 3 days to review them. So what are some things, some top level things where people really need to focus some attention?
Yeah. I would say the number one thing, right, because what is one always concerned with? That is money, right?
Yes.
So there is going to be a lot of stuff in those documents, but the big part is there is a budget that the board has to set every year, right? And you really need to look at those numbers. The budget will tell you certain things, how viable that condo is, what kind of money they have in there to be able to do repairs or to do things that need to be done, and how well they're being run, what's efficient in there. That will also affect your condo dues, right? You don't know. Unless you read those, you can't tell if they've decided to raise the condo dues in the following year, and that necessarily means it's January 1st. It means that whatever part they decide to do their fiscal year is when they're going to start doing it, right? So,
Yes.
And so that's number one important thing that I would definitely focus on.
I was looking at the budget with one of my clients for a large condominium in, I guess it was in Fairfax County. It's right just outside of Arlington.
Yeah.
And there were several line items in there. They spend what I thought was a lot of money on uniforms. For the maintenance guy has a uniform, and you know, they don't just give them jackets and everything, but these guys have uniforms and laundry costs and all of those things. Of course, that adds to that's part of what you're paying for. That
is part of it.
Now, I'm not telling you not to move in, but you need to know,
right,
when you see the guy in the uniform, you're the one paying for it, not somebody else.
Exactly. And the condos, and specifically, right, what are the big costs? You know, you're looking out there and there's a pool. Everyone loves a pool.
Yes.
But you just got to understand, pool maintenance and everything else involved with that is going to be put in part of your condo dues every month.
And when you see the pool, make sure when you look at the budget, you're looking at the insurance. What are they spending on insurance? Because liability insurance for a pool can be just
astronomical.
Yeah. Because if somebody breaks their neck or slips and falls, you're looking at paying out some major money. So those insurances can be pretty high. So when they're advertising all of these amenities, there are two questions: what are the amenities, and what do they really cost you?
Right. I mean, that's what it is.
So, you may look at some of those budgets and such and say, you know what, I love this place. It looks very nice. I'm not sure that I want to pay for these amenities. I might want a place with fewer amenities that might result in a lower condo fee.
Right. Especially if you're downsizing and you're looking to be on a fixed budget, right? You want to know, if you have elevators or you have other things that are going to maybe drive up that cost, and you can look at it and see if you're actually going to use these amenities, that is something that's going to fluctuate a lot more than if it's just the building itself. Right?
Yes.
And then obviously the age of the building and everything else, but you can kind of see that and see what they've done in the budget.
One of the most expensive items to replace is an elevator.
We rented in a pretty high rise up in Roslyn, right? But I used to see some of the stuff from the HOAs, and you would see what was going on, and there was probably 9 elevators in there.
Oh,
but those
my gosh.
elevators, every 3 months, I saw a maintenance guy. And you just knew that the bottom line budget, every time I saw, the maintenance of the elevators was just crazy. It was just insane. And it just kept driving up the monthly cost. So.
There's another thing that I advise clients to look for in the budget, and that's utilities. And the reason I do that is some of the older buildings include gas and electric. All of them are going to include water and sewer.
Right.
But when they start including gas and electric, what are those utility bills? Because people are not always prudent.
Right.
With their heating
Water.
and when you're not getting a bill for your electricity,
Yep.
It's easy to leave stuff burning all night or to overheat the place or to overcool it.
Right.
You go in and it's 65 degrees in the summer. Somebody's paying for that. So look at the utility expense, especially if you're in a situation where each individual unit is not metered.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's definitely something for them to look at, and that's what they really need to understand what's going on as far as like that 200-page thing. You focus on those 4 or 5 pages, at least at your first site. That's what I would focus on first.
There should be a line item in the budget for reserve fund.
Yes.
Every year there should be a certain amount, or every month there should be a certain amount going into a reserve fund. Can you talk about what a reserve fund is and why it's important?
So the reserve fund is part of the condo management. That's part of their responsibility. And what they're using that is they're gaining money from their monthly dues. They're setting that aside. And that's kind of the rainy day fund, I would say, if you had anything else. You're waiting there, let's say the roof is 10 or 15 years old or something like that, and you're kind of thinking that we're going to have to replace it in 10 years. You budget for it, right? You want to make sure you have enough money in that reserve that it's already in there and they're not coming back to you as a unit owner to ask for a special assessment to fix said problem. A lot of condos around here also do a capital contribution at the very beginning. So when you purchase into it, right,
Yes.
You usually pay 2 months of your rental, whatever your condo dues are, HOA dues, and you're paying that in there. And that is going specifically to the reserve. That's where it should go.
West Village of Shirlington is one of those that will do. Very, very well run, very well maintained condo community, but they're very serious about their reserve fund.
Right. And that's important because if you have a low reserve fund, I know Turnberry Tower, not to be specific, but I know over there they had a low reserve fund when they first started. And they had low condo dues in 2010, when they first opened, 2008, somewhere around there. When they first did that, these elevators that I was talking about, they started hitting. So the special assessments just started coming, right? And then their condo dues just kept rising. And that condo building's a very fancy condo building, and their initial condo dues were $500-600 for a 1 bedroom, right? Now they're $1,000, $1,200 for the same unit, but fast forward 10 years later, right?
Right.
And they had to build up that reserve again because it was just poorly managed. So.
Yes. And so one of the things, when you're looking at the reserve fund, I always encourage people to also look to see if there has been a reserve fund study, where they're looking, for example, an engineering firm comes in and says your roofs should last you 30 years. It should cost you about X to replace them. Set money aside for that. It's going to cost you, $100 a foot to replace the sidewalks.
Right.
It's $10,000 a yard to do the driveway.
Yeah.
And so all of these things are going to come due, and when they come due, how much do you need to have? And then that gets updated every 5 years for inflation or something.
Of course.
And you can plan your large projects like that.
Another big one I see is also windows, right? Like they come around and the windows are commercial grade, but they only last for so long. And
Right.
then when they do a window project and it's a big high-rise. That's a lot of windows.
It's a lot of windows. It's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Elevators in larger buildings, windows,
Yep.
hallways, when the carpet wears out, especially if the walls have been as a wall covering instead of paint.
Yep.
All of those things get very expensive. So
I mean, that's the thing, right? You know, you get your unit, and the unit can look beautiful, but you still have the hallways you got to worry about, right? You know, all that other stuff affects your price and your investment. So.
And the pool.
Yeah.
Your pool has to be maintained. It has to be inspected. It has to be, if it cracks or anything, those are expensive repairs.
Yep.
If you have a garage. Right.
Exactly.
But you do want to start with the budget.
Yep.
Look for that line, look for operating expenses, then look for that line that takes you over to the reserve fund.
Yep.
Make sure that there's a reserve fund, and if there's a reserve fund study, it should tell you roughly what that should look
Right.
like. You know, you should know. So if you see $1 million at a large place in a reserve fund, that's probably not a lot of money.
Probably not.
You know, you think they're just sitting on it, but they're going to have some big expenses. I remember over at Fairlington Villages, one of their reserve fund items was replacing the balconies because they were metal balconies on the units. And that's expensive. And they were rusting, and so it came time to replace those. Rather than do a special assessment, they pulled the money from the reserve fund, and it was a 2-year project to replace all of the balconies. And now everything is brand new, but nobody had a rate increase over it.
That's great, right? That's a properly managed association, right? That's what they're doing.
Right. So after we look at the reserve fund, make sure it's there and there's some money in the reserve fund. What are some other things that are really important to try to capture as you go through these many hundreds of pages?
So from an attorney perspective, right, you want to see if there's any active lawsuits. Right. That's a big thing.
So why would someone sue a condo?
So some of the stuff that I've seen as far as people suing condos over, it could be something as, I've seen them sue the board over a special assessment that we just talked about. I've seen them sue the board over capital improvements or something that needed to be done. They didn't believe that their money was being correctly, And so what do? They quit paying their assessment, and then, the condo has to go after them, the association has to go after them, and then they get angry, and then they go after the association. But pending lawsuits are all pretty big. Or if there's some kind of infrastructure problem with a unit that they thought that was a manufacturer's defect, basically, to boil it down, right, when it was built, then they will sue everybody, basically, what's going on. And the problem with the lawsuits are you don't know, when we're talking about the reserve, you don't know if you have enough money in there to budget for the lawyer or to fight it, right? So you make sure that's what's going on. And the other thing is that if you're buying into the place and there's a lawsuit, it could be a problem for your lending if you're borrowing money. They want to know what's going on with that lawsuit, right? Because that could hold up the whole transaction. And so it's important to know. And usually lawsuits, if it's big, you'll see it pretty quickly. You'll see it pretty quickly in the HOA because they'll be talking about what's going on, what's the pending actions, what's happening with the HOA currently.
Okay. So that implies that we ought to be looking at something else with sort of minutes.
Yep.
At least peruse the minutes, see if the same problems are coming up, if they're talking about a lawsuit. You get some clues from that, at least by you don't have to read and study it all, but you want to.
Because those meetings can be a little much. It's just like going down to the county and going to talk and, speaking in front of the county and whatever you want to speak about. You don't know what someone's going to say, right? But they have the right to come and say it, so they can do whatever they want.
That's right.
So those minutes can be a lot, and there is a lot in there usually. But contractually, the HOA has to meet once a year. That's by law, and then they can meet as many other times as they want to. But it's important, right? It's important to go to those meetings because even as you as a homeowner, you want to have a say in what's going on and what's happening, even if you don't think you would care. But it's really your bottom line, right? It's affecting your money.
We don't see these so much in Virginia, but in D.C., there are a number of 4-unit condominiums.
Yep.
So they have to meet once a year. They really don't need to meet every month.
Right.
But if you're in a high-rise or someplace like Fairlington Villages or Colonial Villages where there are a lot of people, they need to be meeting more frequently than once a year.
Yep, of course. Yep.
Bigger budgets, more management stuff. They've probably hired a management company. And so, again, it depends on what kind of condo you're going into. But you do want to see minutes.
Yes. Yes, you can see what's going on and what's happening. I mean, that's what you can kind of determine where is it being managed well? What are the, like you were saying, what are the problems? What's going on? Do they have a resolution for these problems? Things like that. That's what's going on.
Yeah. So the client gets these big, huge things. There's some rules and regulations about them getting them, and the buyer,
Yes.
getting those documents, and how long they have to look through them. Could you talk about what those requirements are, the laws around that?
So in Virginia, in the contract, the way the contract reads is that it does give the buyer 72 hours or 3 days to review these documents. The timing of that is important as well. It doesn't really, it goes for the next day. So if you get it on a Tuesday at 7 p.m., it really doesn't start, your days don't start till Wednesday at 12:01, right? That's when you start your deadlines and you start going forth from that point on. And it's important to review that, right? Because the HOA docs, and it's also important if you're on the listing or the selling side to get those as soon as possible to the buyer, because you want them to see them and then see what's going on and what's happening. But that's also important. It doesn't give them a lot of time to review a 200-page, document, but you've got to make sure to look at those highlights that we've talked about, the reserve, the budget, what kind of, things are going on with that. And that kind of goes towards also as well, you have those 3 days to review it, because you have that 3-day right over, you could rescind from that if you want to. If you didn't like what's in the HOA docs or something did not, jive with whatever you wanted to do, then that's, you could get out of there for that.
So, for example, what you're saying is maybe you look through, you're looking through the minutes and you see that an addendum or something has been passed, an addition to the bylaw,
right.
And now you're only allowed to have a bird, a turtle, and a cat that's under 5 pounds.
Right.
Right? And you're buying this place and you've got 2 dogs that are 35 pounds.
Yeah.
It'd be important to know that.
Yeah, it's very important to know that because.
But now you found that out. Oh my gosh, it said pets, yes, but not these pets.
Yes.
I've just put earnest money down.
Right.
What happens?
Well, then you see that and you're like, well, I read through the HOA docs. I can't have my 2 dogs over there. They're not allowed. So I'm sorry. I'm going to have to rescind my offer. And by law, you can rescind it and your EMD comes back to you as a buyer.
So there's no penalty to the buyer.
Correct.
If you look through those documents and on day 2 you find this thing that you just can't live with.
Right.
Right? You can call up or you can give them in writing.
Yep.
It always has to be in writing.
Writing's always better. Always easier to prove writing than it is to be like, oh, well, I talked to so-and-so and he said, yeah, that's what's going on. So
remember, in Virginia, you can have a verbal contract, but a verbal contract is not enforceable. So it needs to be in writing. What's in writing is enforceable.
Yep.
So you put it in writing, I void the contract or I rescind the contract because of the information that's in the homeowner document. You don't have to specify what it is, right?
No.
You just say, I'm out.
Yep.
And you're out. You get your earnest money back. If you've done your home inspection already, you're out of that, right? But you can walk away and start all over again.
Yeah, and I mean that's important because, and there's certain breeds of dogs. You got to read in there as well. I mean it's very specific sometimes. I know you've seen all kinds of things in certain HOA docs, but it can be very specific, or it can be a certain weight or certain things like that.
I've seen number of animals, number of dogs, where there's not a number of cats. Weight of dogs.
Yep.
You can have 1 dog 80 pounds, but you can't have 2 40-pounders. All kinds of things are in those. I've seen breeds, which gets a little tricky because
there's a lot of crossbreeds now.
Yes.
So, or you don't know exactly what the breed is.
Right. So yeah, you really have to take a look at that. Just because it says pet friendly in the listing,
right,
doesn't mean that your pet is gonna.
Yep. And that's important. I mean, I know I treat my dog as my child, so that's and Yogi's not living a bad life at all. Let's be honest. So.
That's right. If Yogi can't go, I don't go.
Right.
It's real simple.
The only thing I would say you would need to look at is what do you plan to do with this property after the fact? Are you using this as just your primary home? Do you have any intention to ever rent it out? or to use it as an investment property? Is this your stepping stone to go further?
Or an Airbnb?
Right. And I, in 10 years of doing this, I have yet to find a big HOA that's going to allow an Airbnb. Right. It's really tough to find. For short-term rentals is what they call it. It's not necessarily against Airbnb.
Right.
But it's really they want to make sure that their unit owners, their clients are happy. And so I've seen different versions of that. Airbnbs are tough, but you got to see what's kind of going on with that. But the big also is how long is a lease and how many leases are allowed in the building?
Yes.
Because there can be restrictions on that.
That's right.
Right? So if the building is, let's say it's 75% owner occupied, that's fine, 25% are rentals. But if you're the 27th percent that wants to come in there, the HOA could be like, well, nope.
And a bank would be interested in that as well, wouldn't they?
Yep, because they want to make sure everything's good to go.
Yeah, if it's the other way around and you've got 75% renters, a bank may not be interested in financing that condo.
Because you don't know who's taking care of the condo is what it's coming down to. The whole building, right? Because you're kind of in a commune at this point. I mean, that's where it comes from, right? You are all in this together, whether you want to be it or not.
Yes.
It's not just like an apartment building where it's owned and property managed and everything else, and you're just renting. You actually own this along with everybody else, the owners in there. And so, if you're in Unit 1 and then Unit 2 is a rental, Unit 3 is a rental, and you're like, well, we get these new people that come in every year. They don't respect the rules, right?
That's right. They're not caring for the place
right. Or their owner didn't tell them that they couldn't have 3 dogs or 2 dogs, and then now you as the one that's actually living in there has to deal with these other people, and that's just a headache, right? That's a big headache for them.
Awesome. Well, this has been a great discussion, David. I've got my trivia question.
Are
you ready for it?
Yep.
What was the first state that passed laws enabling a condominium?
We're going to go on the East Coast. I am going to say New York.
You would think so, yes. Hawaii, 1958.
Really?
Yes. How about that?
Not till 1958.
Hawaii, yes.
I would never think of Hawaii out of all of them.
I would never have either. And I didn't actually know who was number 2. I would never have guessed number 2, Utah.
Huh.
So there you have
West. Never mind. My whole East thing was all out. Goes to show.
There you have it.
Not going to Jeopardy anytime soon. So it's good.
Hey, we're Easterners. We're supposed to think of the East Coast first.
Exactly.
All right, David, thank you very much. Friends, this is David Cartner from Highland Title. He's an attorney. He's a specialist in all of these areas. He looks at these documents, answers these questions all day, every day for clients and for realtors like myself. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion. Yogi certainly has. And I will talk to you soon. And when we figure out what the next Gary Explains Things is going to be.